Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip-hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese. Best thing ever.
Hello and welcome to Away the Podcast. It's Martin here, and you join us today for another episode of On This Week, where we take a look back at some of the key events to occur, predictably, on this week in the history of Sunderland AFC. There's a whole host of stuff to get through as usual today, and to help me wade through the archives, I've got a couple of chaps who definitely know their Sunderland history. So first of all, we'll say hello to Andrew Smithson. Good morning, Andrew.
Hello. Good morning. Nice to see you, Martin, and nice to be here.
Excellent. Very nice to see you as well, mate. And we've also got Kelvin with us as usual. And Kelvin's feeling a bit under the weather this morning, but for the show must go on, Kelvin. So you've pulled on your big boy socks and you're turning up for duty.
Thankfully, I've got more than the big boy socks on. But I'm here.
That would be a treat.
And it's lovely to see you both.
Very good. We will move very swiftly on and go back to Andrew, because you left the listeners with something to ponder on, didn't you, last week?
I did, yes. We always like a little question to just give people something to mull over. 18th of February 1930, Sunderland lost an FA Cup fifth round replay away at Nottingham Forest. We were, however, wearing an unusual shirt. And I was just wondering if anybody knew about the shirt and could describe it. Don't worry, though, because if you gents can't do that, I have actually prepared the answer and I can fill in the blanks myself. But I'll let you two go first if you've got any stabs in the dark you want to make.
So it was an unusual shirt against Forest. What year?
1930.
Ooh. I haven't got a clue.
Yeah. Well, it was actually a set of strips that we borrowed off Nottingham Forest. We wore a white shirt with a large red V coming down from the shoulders towards the chest, and the same on the back. And the best way I can describe it, because I don't have any other examples of Sunderland wearing a top like this, but it was more like a rugby league shirt than a football shirt. Yeah, in its design. As I say, it's very unusual. I can't ever recall any Sunderland looking to wear anything like this at any other time in their history. It wasn't our design. It was Nottingham Forest's change strip, and we ended up having to borrow it. As I say, this was a replay, gents. We'd played on Saturday the 15th at Roker Park in the first game. Forest actually wore the shirts at Roker Park. The Football Echo that night said it was no doubt to make the colours more distinguishable. We were 2-0 up at that game at half-time, but then allowed Forest back. They equalised with a late header. the notes and comments section in the Football Echo for the Saturday game, which was always a brief paragraph or two that followed the match report, and Argus gave us an immediate reaction to the game. He was really unimpressed with our showing, said we deserved to be pegged back because rather than getting a couple more goals like our first half play had warranted, we'd, quote, fiddled about. So he wasn't too pleased with how we were in the second half. We put pressure on ourselves. He didn't rate Forest as a team either. He didn't rate certain individual performances from Sunderland, so he was really unhappy. He did, though, sign off that little section by saying that he was aware that LNER were going to be running an excursion to the Midlands for the replay on the Wednesday, the charge for which was going to be 11 shillings and 6D. What was the
Get
D?
in.
Yeah, what was the D? What did that stand for?
It's pence, wasn't it? Yeah.
Was it right?
Yeah, pence.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Andrew, would you think August would have been happier if they'd managed to get those strips washed from the Saturday and the lads had played in?
Well, something must have been off about the kids, because the replay, there was a really decent Sunderland following. There was around about 300 Sunderland fans went down to the game, which in that period was exceptional, particularly as it was a midweek game, and we've spoken before about it was difficult to just find time to nick off work. The train that they went down in was bedecked in red and white, seemingly. Argus, again, he's a busy fella. He's not only has he had to write about the initial game, he's then going to write about the replay. He states, quite simply, there was evidently some objection to Sunderland playing in red and white, and they turned out in the same coloured jerseys as Notts Forest wore at Sunderland. Me saying Notts Forest isn't a mistake. Most of the North East press around this game are calling them Notts Forest, not Nottingham Forest, which I don't think...
cardinal sin these days, isn't it?
Exactly. It wouldn't make you very popular. Forest, whether you want to call them Notts or Nottingham, were mid-table in Division 2, and yet they won this replay quite comfortably. Billy Eden put Sunderland ahead, but Forest come roaring back and knocked us out 3-1. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Kelvin. Obviously, Forest didn't wash them kits, or they put itching powder in or something. And that was why a very unfamiliar-looking Sunderland were put out of the cup. And please, as we always say, if anybody knows of any other times Sunderland wore a kit that looked along the same lines, hey, get in touch and refresh our memory, please.
Andrew, you're airing your dirty laundry there, bunny lad.
For somebody under the weather, Kelvin, you're sharper than usual. So I don't know how that works.
There's gesticulations and all sorts going on the other end of the camera there, which obviously listeners can't see, but me and Andrew can see only too well. We will start this week's episode on February the 16th. And 1927, Sunderland beat Birmingham 4-1 at Roker Park. 2 goals from Sam Ramsey, 1 from Jack Bartley, and another from Billy Grimshaw, who sounds like a character from Coronation Street. But that was enough to give us a 4-1 win at home. And in 1939, Jimmy Connor is somebody who we've spoken about, mentioned a lot over these episodes on this week. He's scored a lot of goals for Sunderland. And this was Jimmy Connor's final game for the club. It was a game against Blackburn Rovers. Now, this was a FA Cup 5th round replay. It was 0-0, and this game finished at Ewood Park. We'd drawn the first leg 1-1 at home, thanks to an 89th minute equaliser from Alex Hastings. Gone to this game at Ewood Park, Jimmy Connor has suffered a cruciate ligament injury, so that brought the curtain down on his Sunderland career. And, he played 283 games for the club, scored 62 goals. Fantastic player for the club in the 30s, wasn't he? part of a lot of success on the field. That game ended 0-0 anyway. We got beat 1-0 in the second replay. Of course, the FA Cup in these days, there was no penalty shootout, so you kept replaying until you got a winner. The second replay took place at Hillsborough, and that was a 1-0 defeat. But yes, 1939, February the 16th, saw Jimmy Connor's Sunderland career come to an end. 1957, this must be the date for things coming to an end, because Len Shackleton scored his last goal for Sunderland. It was a 5-2 home win against Sheffield Wednesday. And he also, at the same time, became the first Sunderland player to score 100 post-World War II goals for the club. So he signed off his goal scoring in style. This was a 5-2 win, as I mentioned. Ray Daniel got a goal. Charlie Fleming, the confused ostrich, got 2. And Don Revy was the other scorer on that occasion. Now, in 1974, Sunderland played Preston. We beat them 2-1. Rod Belfort and Vic Hallam were amongst the goals. Nobby Stiles was in the Preston midfield. Of course, he'd won the World Cup with England 8 years earlier. And Bobby Charlton, who'd also won the World Cup 8 years earlier for England, was the manager of Preston on that day. 1991, Sunderland played Nottingham Forest at Roker Park. Brian Clough, I think was this Brian Clough's last return professionally to Roker Park? I think it might have been, because Stuart Pearce was in charge in 95 or 96, wasn't he, when Forest came? So I think this was Brian Clough's last professional return to Roker.
Didn't he resign at the end of the first Premier League season when Forest were relegated? Yeah.
That's right. And I remember this game quite vividly. I remember the Nottingham Forest fans, this was the era they were singing the Righteous Brothers, You've Lost That Love and Feeling. They kept singing all during the game for some reason. I'm not too sure what the connection was between the Righteous Brothers and Nottingham Forest, but one of Sunderland's Righteous Brothers, Marco Gabbiadini, got a header to give us a 1-0 win in the first half. That goal occurred, and Brian Mooney, who we just signed from Preston, made his debut on that occasion too. And I remember, I'm sure it's in the programme for this game, there's a brilliant picture of Brian Mooney being unveiled at Roker Park, and he'd obviously just been chucked a shirt that was way too big for him. So put this on over your suit. There was snow behind him. There's obviously a snow-covered pitch behind him. And Brian Mooney stood there. He looks like a quarterback, never mind a little winger as he was. But there you go. I think that must be the picture on the actual day. But there's a picture in the, it's either in the programme or maybe the week before. But anyway, Brian Mooney stood there with a shirt that he's definitely been told to put on over his suit for fear of getting too cold. Now, 1905. This is a stat or a fact that most Sunderland fans are kind of brought up with. Alf Common became the first £1,000 player in Britain when he was transferred to Middlesbrough. Now, I was digging through the archives, and although some records say this happened on February the 16th, I've actually found the Sunderland Echo report of it on February the 14th. So where that date actually lies is another matter. But Alf Common's an interesting player, an interesting person, because he was a local lad. He was brought up in Sunderland. He played for South Hilton and Jarrow before being signed on for Sunderland. And in the 1900-1901 season, he played 18 games for us and scored 6 goals. And then he was transferred to Sheffield United. So even though he'd done well for us as a youngster, Sheffield United had come in for him. Apparently they were struggling a little bit. And they paid, I think, 325 quid they paid for him. So that would have been relatively good money at the time. He played for Sheffield United for 3 seasons in top flight, 67 games, 22 goals. So, he's going at a goal every 3 games, which is a pretty good record. And at the start of the 1904 season, Sunderland bought him back. He refused to sign a new contract at Sheffield United. He said he had business interests in Sunderland that he wanted to get back to the Northeast to look after. And Sunderland bought him and a goalkeeper called Albert Lewis, who, when you look into him, he was much more of a cricketer than a a footballer. He was one of these people who did both, but he's much more recognised for being a Somerset cricketer. But that fee was a record fee of £520. So you fast forward to the February of 1905, and Middlesbrough have come in for Alf Common. Now, the newspaper reports at the time suggest that there'd been lots of rumours going on, lots of speculation over the preceding weeks. And while Sunderland had always dismissed the speculation, the speculation kept bubbling under. Now, what the speculation was like in 1905, I don't really know. There must have been pub talk and little bits happening in the papers and stuff like that. And Andrew, I think you and I were talking about Albert McInroy a few weeks ago, weren't we? Where the Sunderland board had seemingly said to Newcastle, here's your figure, here's what we want for him. Now, bugger off is essentially what the thing was. And to Sunderland's surprise, they came back and said, yeah, we'll pay that. Well, this is something that seems to have happened here, because we'd broken the transfer record, £520 for Alf Common and a goalkeeper 6 months earlier. Middlesbrough after him, and we've always gone, well, give us £1,000, seemingly thinking that it would shut them up. Middlesbrough said, all right. So £1,000 came up to Sunderland, that broke the transfer record again. And it seemed a very strange one. In the paper describes it as a great surprise to many. His departure will be keenly regretted at Sunderland, of which he is a native and a great favourite with his people. Now, he's played one season as a young lad, 18 games. He's had another 6 months, 3 seasons later. So to describe him as a great favourite of the people of Sunderland, of the fans, is kind of telling in itself. And it's a funny one to consider. He goes to Middlesbrough. He does well for Middlesbrough. He's been capped by England and Sheffield United, so he'd come back as an international player. He played 5 seasons at Middlesbrough, 168 games, 58 goals. He goes on to play for Arsenal, 77 games, 23 goals, and he finishes his career off at Preston. But a little bit of description, I guess, around that fact of the £1,000 transfer, because it does seem as if we were just trying to bat Middlesbrough off, and they surprised us by coming back with the money that we'd asked for. And that was if Alf Common went off to Middlesbrough, and he did not return to Sunderland. So he was 24 when he left Sunderland for the second time.
I assume Middlesbrough was perhaps a bit more of a palatable move, because if he continued to have business interests back at home, back at Sunderland, it's a lot easier to manage when you're living closer to those businesses. It is interesting what you say, because you hear of a record transfer and you assume, oh, this guy must have amazing stats. He must have done all sorts for Sunderland. But as you say, whilst he was a crowd favourite, it wasn't like he was somebody who'd been there for years doing awesome things for the team. We've seen this season how players can come along and very quickly get themselves a bit of popularity on the terraces, but it'll only be in the years to come that we'll know whether they become true legends of the club. My recollection of the whole story, though, is that Middlesbrough were absolutely desperate. I think they were fighting hard against relegation, so were perhaps willing to, we see this even nowadays, don't we? Teams are willing to pay over the odds if they think a signing is going to be the key. And I've just got to say fair play to Sunderland, because it sounds as if whoever does our transfer negotiations, bit like I've heard this off a few tradesmen recently. At the moment, the market is so weighted in favour of the tradesmen, they can just put a ridiculous job on a price. And if they don't get the job, it's not a problem.
A price on the job.
Well, what did I say? Did I say ridiculous job on the price?
Yeah.
Come on, Martin. You could have easily cut that out and we could have started again. But yeah, I'm
just having fun imagining what the ridiculous job might be.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Better not actually. But yeah, a plumber or what have you can go at the moment. Just stick a daft price on it. If they don't get the work, it's no problem because they've got other jobs lined up. Their diaries packed. But if somebody does pay the money, oh well, there's a nice surprise. Happy days. And Sunderland were presumably in the same boat. They didn't need to sell Common. They could maybe sniff Borough's desperation and thought, well, we'll make the most of this and just absolutely rinse them.
Interestingly, the transfer also included a friendly that we would play at Middlesbrough.
Oh,
I'm not sure
okay.
how that actually worked, but we played them a few days later in a friendly at Ayresome Park. And that season, Alf Common had, I think maybe scored 6 goals in 22 games or something like that. So, again, it wasn't as if he scored 20 and 22 and he was knocking it out the park. But you absolutely bang on with what you say about Middlesbrough and their determination and desire to stay up. They were struggling. They ended up staying up that season by 2 points. So Alf Common, for £1,000 to stay up, obviously the fees and the prize money and all that sort of stuff weren't as great as they are today, but it was still a big thing for the clubs to stay into the top flight, wasn't it? And that transfer obviously helped Borough do that. Now, I just want to chuck in another thing. On the same day in the Sunderland Echo, but nothing to do with football, there was this little story which I found amusing. It's fun in some respects because nobody was hurt apparently. But it said last night the fire brigade were called out to a house in Harrison Street, Ayres Quay. It's alleged that a man who was under the influence of drink had been throwing bedclothes and articles of furniture onto the fire, and the blaze had alarmed the neighbours. When the brigade arrived, portions of a chair were blazing merrily in the fireplace. The service of the brigade was not required, and the only harm done was that the man destroyed a quantity of his own furniture. So that was big news on that day in 1905 as well. But it's good fun actually, isn't it, when you go through the archives and you look at some of the other stories that make the press. There must have been, even in those days, I think they were quite desperate to fill column inches on occasions, and stories of a drunk man chucking a chair into his fire made the headlines on that occasion.
It's lethal as well, though, Martin, is it not? You can lose hours of your time.
Days. Very, very, very easily, but no, it's good. I was just thinking before, actually, I was looking at that, I was like, you know what, if I didn't have any other commitments or any other work to do, I'd probably spend a vast amount of time every day just scrolling through the archives, because once you start, it's pretty impossible to stop, isn't it?
On the subject of archives, I am going to do a bit of self-promotion here. Previously, I've written about this period in a game played against Middlesbrough in the league on the 7th of January 1905. Alf Common is one of the scorers for Sunderland. We beat them 3-1. As I say, Middlesbrough were struggling at the time. And it touches on, this might be another factor in the sale, it touches on, at that point, we've got a caretaker overseeing first team affairs because Alex Mackey had been suspended due to, surprise, surprise, in Sunderland's history, an FA investigation into financial irregularities, if I can say it. So that might have also been a factor in everything. Maybe the club were thinking there might be fines on the way or something along those lines, and thought, oh well, we might be able to get Middlesbrough to pay these off if we charge them over the odds. So that was the 7th of January 1905. There's an on this day already on the website, and that gives a little bit more. What did you say? We put on our waders, Martin, and we wade through the archives.
Something I might take off next week if I didn't say it this week.
Yeah. Obviously, I'd already had me waders on one time and done a little bit of background reading on it, on what led to that big money deal.
But you did not cover the fire in Harrison Street, did you?
No, and that was rather remiss of me because that was clearly big news back at the time.
I hadn't realised, lads, that sale, Alf Common sale, must have taken place over the period of the Andrew McCumbee affair. Was that why Alec Mackey was suspended? Aye. Wow, what a period. Yeah. I wonder if the FA looked at that transfer, the Alf Common transfer. I wonder if they cast a beady eye over that at the time.
It would cause some interest, wouldn't it? Because it was such a markup on, he's effectively doubled in price in the space of 6 months. So I'm sure it would have raised an eyebrow or two at the very least, wouldn't it?
It's a clever way as well, isn't it? If you've spent a load of money bringing a player in, but then you can quickly arrange a friendly game, and I know people dispute whether Middlesbrough v Sunderland is a derby or not, but certainly from Middlesbrough's point of view, they see the visit of Sunderland as one of their big games. So if you're short of cash, you're out of pocket because you've just lashed it all on a player. Not a bad little option, is it? Oh, let's just arrange a friendly where we get the punters coming in through the door, see if we can recoup some of those losses.
No,
Smart work from Middlesbrough, that one.
You could have also ordered some straw to put in the pitch in case it snowed, couldn't you?
Hey, who knows? Who knows, Martin?
We will take a very short break while we go and look at straw prices. We'll be back soon.
By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes 3-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling 4 things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sport. Let's take a look at some of the lineup. The Anfield Wrap.
Liverpool are not equipped. That is a deliberate decision, and for me, that is deeply unacceptable.
Football cliches.
Turns out that Rudy Voller was born son of Rachel and Derek Voller from Basildon and Hainault.
Tennis Unfiltered.
If Sinner and Alcaraz are turning up to tournaments and are bothered 99% of the time, one of them is going to win it.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.
Welcome back to How We're the Podcast, and you are with us for another episode of On This Week. Now, February the 17th, Sunderland played their 1000th league game in 1923. It wasn't a very exciting affair, though. It was a 0-0 draw against Oldham at Boundary Park. 1973, Vic Hallam made his home debut for Sunderland against Middlesbrough, and he scored in a 4-0 win. Mickey Horswell, Billy Hughes and Dennis Stewart got the other goals on that occasion.
That was the cup final team that played. If you look at the 11 that took the field,
right.
It was a cracking game. We scored 3 goals in 5 minutes. It was a cracker.
Very good. Well, you'll have written about that one before, have you? Or you can.
Trying to remember. I think I did, because what I remember about it is apart from the 3 goals in 5 minutes, was Eric Gates's brother Bill Gates played centre half for Borough that day, and Nobby Stiles was on the bench for Borough.
Oh, really?
And he was getting a bit of stick from the. He was always a bit like of a Leighton James character, Nobby Stiles. You know, he was always a boy that you would, if he was playing for the opposition, you'd always give him a bit of stick. You know, Yeah, it was a cracking game. That would remember it well.
Well, if you want some more colour on that one, dig out Kelvin's article on that game in 1973, and that will provide as much colour as you can handle, I suspect. 1998, Sunderland were third in the First Division, or the new First Division, second tier. We had a 4-1 home win over Reading. And this was the third home game in a row where we'd scored 4 goals. Kevin Phillips got 2, Niall Quinn got 1, Alex Ray got the other on this occasion, and Phil Parkinson was marshalling the Reading midfield on that afternoon as well. 2007, there was another 4 goals at Stadium Light. This was a 4-0 win over Southend. And this was the Roy Keane season. This was the surge that we were going up the table, and this was the first time that we got into a playoff place that season. So before February 17th, we'd been underneath the playoff positions, but we were just gradually working our way up, and we beat Southend 4-0. David Connolly, Toby Hyson, and 2 goals from Stern John gave us the victory on that day. And 2024, we got beat 2-1 at Birmingham. And this was the game that you'll remember. It was Mick Beale's last game in charge of Sunderland. I think it was Tony Mowbray's last game in charge of Birmingham, wasn't it? Because Mowbray had just joined Birmingham after leaving Sunderland, 2.5 months before. And obviously he had his health issues and he stepped down from the Birmingham job after this game. It was also memorable for Trey Hume going off the field and trying to shake Beale's hand, and Beale allegedly not seeing it, but it seemed a little bit dubious, that excuse, didn't it? But yes, that was the end of Michael Beale at Sunderland. Now then, February the 18th, 1928, Sunderland beat Portsmouth 5-3 at Stratton Park. Dave Halliday got 4 goals and Jack Dowsey got the other one. 1963, we beat Gravesend and Northfleet 5-2 in a 4th round FA Cup replay at Roker. We'd drawn 1-1 with them a week earlier. George Mulhall, Ambrose Fogarty, Nick Sharkey, and 2 goals from Johnny Crossan gave us the victory on that occasion. 4 years later, another FA Cup tie. This one was against Peterborough, and Neil Martin scored a hat-trick. We beat Peterborough 7-1. John O'Hare, Bobby Kerr got 2, and Jim Baxter were the other goal scorers for Sunderland. But do you know the name of the chap who scored Peterborough's goal?
I don't, but Kelvin looks confident.
Oh,
he does look confident, doesn't he?
Well, was that game? It helps when you've been there. I cannot remember what I had for my breakfast, but I can remember quite a lot about the games that I saw. And he was called Tommy Watson.
He was called Tommy Watson.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a couple of very influential Tommy Watsons in Sunderland's history, and this one wasn't quite so influential, but he did score against us for Peterborough. 1971, Colin Todd departed the club, moving to Derby County for a record fee of $175,000. And Colin Todd, somebody who you'll have seen come up and play for the first team at Sunderland, went on to have a very good career as well, didn't he?
I've listened to you guys lament the passing of Gabbiadini and, Todd O'Gowan. I was distraught. You'd think somebody had chopped me right arm off. It was just. I'd watched him all the way through his sort of youth team, coming into the team, and he was just such a baller. This boy, he was a brilliant footballer. And after Suggett going, I just thought, what are the club playing at? But Brian Clough knew what he was doing. He was buying a really good player. And to be fair to Todd, he'd stuck with the team. He'd gone when we'd gotten relegated. I think he probably could have gone in that close season if he'd pushed, but he didn't. He stuck with the team, and he was our captain that season. But it was the football was attritional in the second division, and he was built for better things. You just had to watch him play, and you'd know that he was built for better things. I know I've said it before, but pound for pound, he's the best young player that's ever come through Sunderland's books for me.
Yeah.
And I know I'll happy to debate that. We should have a top 10 best young players. I'd be happy to go on that part and talk about him.
Well, you're just giving away your number one answer there if we do that. Spoiler alert on the top of this podcast, Calvin. 1989, Sunderland played a game at Swindon at the county ground. We got beat 4-1. Gordon Armstrong put us up in front very early on after 4 minutes. Alan McLaughlin got one of the goals for Swindon. He, of course, featured heavily in the playoff final a year later, didn't he? Sunderland had a debutant on this occasion. A former England international played his only game for the club. Any ideas who that was?
Was that too late for Peter Barnes?
It was Peter Barnes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Dennis Smith had signed him as we were struggling to break teams down. We were going through a little bit of a rough patch in form, and he brought Peter Barnes in, hoping he could get back to his magical days of Manchester City and Leeds and stuff like that. But he played one game, didn't do too well. There was a game a week or two later that he was very close to starting. We played Man City at home, and Colin Pascoe was viewed to be missing from the game. He was expected to miss the game with an injury, and Barnes was due to play that game if Pascoe did not make it. But surprisingly, Pascoe did make it, and Barnes, I think, left the club on transfer deadline day, which happened in March. He stuck around for 6 weeks or so, but yeah, he didn't see much action, or he didn't see any action after the game at Swindon. 1995, we just mentioned Alan McLaughlin. 1995, he was playing for Portsmouth and he scored a goal against us at Roker Park. Now, this was Mick Buxton, Sunderland versus Terry Fenwick's Portsmouth. And Terry Fenwick, of course, is a North East lad. He was in the England 86 World Cup team, wasn't he? He's one of the players who was chasing Maradona alongside Peter Reid and Terry Butcher for those keeping count of Sunderland connections for Maradona's goal. But Martin Smith had put us 2-0 up with 2 goals for McLaughlin, and the lad called Stuart Dorling got 2 goals back for Portsmouth to draw that game. Kit Simons was in the Portsmouth defence that day, and Jimmy Glass, who I don't know if you remember, scored that memorable goal for Carlisle to keep them in the league. He was in goal for Portsmouth that day, which I can't remember him playing for Portsmouth, but I certainly remember him scoring that goal for Carlisle.
Like you, Martin, I remember the name and the big story at Carlisle. I don't recall much else about his playing career, but you mentioning that Maradona goal and the England players trailing in his wake, I saw it straight away on Kelvin's face. You've perked him right up now. He's not feeling under the weather anymore. He's feeling top of the world. Look at him. He's chuffed with that one.
Hey, I just dropped it in to perk Kelvin up. It's all right. Throw him a bone every now and again, can't we? 2012, Sunderland beat Arsenal 2-0 in the FA Cup at the stadium with like Kieran Richardson, and an own goal from Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain got the win on that occasion. And we're going to skip forward a couple of days here to February the 20th in 1980. Now, this was something that was rumbling on for a few days beforehand, Andrew, and we ended up signing a player who would go on to do some good things for the club.
Yes, we're going to have a little look at Joe Hinnigan, who we signed from Wigan Athletic. And a bit like the Alf Common story that you touched on earlier, Martin, dates for when these deals sometimes conflict ever so slightly. And I think the reason is a move might be agreed in all intents and purposes, it's been confirmed, but you get delays in sending documents. It takes a couple of days to get things registered. It's not like we've got the good old fax machine in the corner of the room there to just send all the paperwork off to the Football League or the FA and get things rubber stamped. So yeah, how you define the day somebody signed for Sunderland back in previous eras can be a little bit open to debate. And this Joe Hinnigan arrival from Wigan in 1980 is one of those. The The official record books have it down as the 20th, but really there's a good case to argue that it was all done in the days prior. We said recently on one of the pods, and I can't remember if it was actually a pod I was sat in on or I was just listening to, but it was around the transfer market and how the January transfer window causes this really concertinaed, frenzied period of 3 or 4 weeks of buying players. But back in 1979, 80, you could build your team up over time because there wasn't this strict window for buying players. Ken Knighton was the manager, and he just, over the course of a few weeks, over the course of a few months, when he thought it was right, would dip into the transfer market, spend a bit of cash, and it worked because we went up that season. When you look back on it, though, the team that started that campaign isn't the one that finished it, because he brought in Claudio Marangoni, John Hawley, Stan Cummins at various points. Their names we've all spoken about previously. I know Kelvin absolutely loves Stan Cummins, for example. So it's slowly but surely Knighton's building up his team, and there's several new faces being brought in as we go along. Chris Turner was the only new arrival who'd actually come pre-season. The rest of them fell into place the longer we went on. The 15th of February is when this story seems to have kicked off. It's being reported that Knighton had made what was being referred to as a shock swoop. Nice bit of alliteration there, but hard for me to get my teeth around that one. This lad, Joe Hinnigan, is very highly rated, seemingly. There was strong suggestions that Man City, who were in the top flight, were very interested in him. Knighton, however, is already on his way down to the region, because on the 16th we've got an away game at Preston North End. So he's in the Northwest. He stops off on the 15th at Springfield Park to try and put things into place for this move. Readers who are picking up on this story in the local press, they're being told that Hinnigan can play across the back four. He's got a lot of pace. If he was to be used as a fullback, he would be considered an attacking fullback. So it's all looking very good. That sounds like a very sensible purchase. The reason it's being referred to as a shock, though, is because he was primarily a fullback, and we've already got a couple of options on the books. Another one of Kelvin's favourites, Joe Bolton, he's there. He's part of the team. He's a regular. There's also Tim Gilbert, who's on the fringes. So nobody had particularly expected us to be signing somebody who's predominantly considered a fullback. Not least Hinnigan, who, although he's very highly rated, he was only in his second season of league football. Wigan in the 70s weren't a football league team. They had to fight to get promoted. I don't even think it was automatic promotion then. I'm assuming they had to be voted in to the Football League. So, yeah, it wasn't a name people were expecting. It wasn't a position people were thinking Sunderland needed to rush out and strengthen. Knighton, however, obviously thinks it's the right time to swoop. And this is only 8 months into his time in charge at Sunderland, and a lot is being made of he's now spent over £1 million on these players. Perhaps that was doable back then because it was happening in drips and drabs. Maybe if we only had a month to sign all of our players, the board might have got a little bit tetchy at us splashing £1 million out all in one go on these players, but it's drawn out over a period. The 16th of February, that's the Saturday, that's when we are playing at Preston North End, and it's widely reported, it's widely agreed that everything has now been put in place and that Hinnigan will be joining early the following week once he's had a medical up on Weir's side. We lost that game at Preston and it left us 7th in the table, and that defeat becomes significant as I go on with this story. Mike Cody was on the bench for Sunderland at Preston. He came on as a second half substitute. It, in the end, proves to be his final outing for Sunderland. But beforehand, Frank Clark spoke to the press and did a lot of the pre-match build-up because Knighton was away tying up this deal at Wigan. So the assistant boss, Frank Clark, steps in and does a lot of the usual duties. He explained that Cody had been put on the bench because he could do a job in a few positions. And versatility is obviously what they'd seen in Hinnigan. These were the days of only one substitute. So it was vital that if you put somebody in the squad, you put them on the bench. It was ideal if they could do a couple of positions and give you a bit of flexibility. Knighton talks to the press about the deal and points out the fact that Hinnigan is two-footed. He points out the fact that he could score goals, and he says it's important to have a high-standard squad of players at his disposal, particularly, for instance, with Easter coming up. Easter's around the corner, and he says that your plans could be knocked out if you pick up 1 or 2 injuries at Easter. Squads then were a lot smaller. You maybe only had 15 or 16 first choice regular pros. So any player who can do a job in a few positions is bound to be highly valued. So that was obviously what Hinnigan was going to bring to the group. One of the articles on that day says that as a result of this move, the club are now willing to listen to offers for Peter Gilbert. He does not Peter Gilbert, Tim Gilbert. Peter Gilbert was his son, wasn't he? If I've got those two confused earlier on in this little deep dive, I apologise. He doesn't actually move on until a year or so later, but he was expected to attract a bit of interest, and Ipswich Town and QPR, who I think were both top flight at the time, they were both supposedly interested in him. So maybe Knighton saw that as a good way to strengthen the squad whilst he had somebody on his books who was getting a bit of attention. As I say, it didn't happen in the end, and Gilbert stayed around. There's another article here on the 16th, penned by our good pal Jeff Story, who worked for the Echo and who I think we all enjoyed reading over the years. Knighton praises 2 of his scouts, Jimmy Greenhaw and Jack Watson, who, Kelvin, you and I were talking about recently, weren't we? Off the pod, we had a bit of a chat about them. They'd only just been brought into the club, and Knighton saw this is their first signing, as it were, because they were the 2 people that had identified Hinnigan and flagged him up. Seemingly, not only was Knighton happy to go with their recommendations, he was keen to do the deal in secret. He was keen to get it done quickly, because now not only were Man City said to be interested, but Chelsea's name had been thrown into the mix. So it looks as if he's quite sought after, is Joe Hinnigan. Knighton, another quote of his says, "He will give us vital competition and cover, which is something that I feel we have been lacking in this area." Then he goes on to say that Hinnigan is the best striker of a ball with either foot I have ever seen. So that's pretty high praise for Hinnigan. Knighton is, however, quite cagey about when he expects him to come into the team. He wasn't necessarily being brought in with a view to him suddenly coming into the first team. He was perhaps being considered as a backup option, a player who can do a few positions as and when the need arises. Come the Monday morning, the 18th, when he's expected to have his fitness test at Roker Park. The press were really not happy with our performance at Deepdale. We lost. We played quite badly. And Steve Whitworth and Joe Bolton are both singled out for a lot of criticism. And it's being said that although this lad might not be coming in as a guaranteed starter, Whitworth and Bolton couldn't argue if they'd been dropped. So that's the Monday. The Tuesday, it's now being talked about Hinnigan in training for Sunderland. He'd apparently rolled his ankle in one of his final appearances for Wigan Athletic. So did a bit of light training only under the watchful eye of Johnny Waters, our physio of some time and another great name in Sunderland history. So there isn't actually an official announcement in the press that Hinnigan has signed. We're just left to assume that after his fitness test, everything moves a step closer to be sealed. On the 19th, he's at the club and he's training. And then on the 20th, which is recorded in all the archives as the day he officially signs for us, there's actually very little said about him in the papers. It's almost viewed now as if, well, we've done all the introductions, we've done the quotes with Knighton in the days following up, and the 20th is just the day when everything's signed, sealed, and delivered behind the scenes, and that's when the transfer documentation sent over to be registered, that type of thing. Whereas now, every step of the way, a transfer is reported on social media, and there's announcements and updates. And again, on another pod recently, I think Johnny Hawley speaks about that, and that's one of his Room 101 frustrations, the way that you get updates of so-and-so's on the plane, so-and-so's watching a film on the plane, so-and-so's got off the plane and is getting into a taxi. The taxi's white and it's driven by a local firm, and you get to hear everything. Whereas for us, because there's been a bit of build-up, the deal happens, and we're kind of like, yeah, well, we already knew that. There's no need for another splash in the papers. So there we go. It's done. He's getting to know his teammates. And then on the 23rd, he is brought into the team. He does make his debut. It's Joe Bolton that drops out. And that's a bit of a statement because Joe Bolton, another one of Kelvin's favourites, he was our longest serving player at the time. Hinnigan's come along, obviously done well in training. The team had this disappointing defeat. So Knighton then does suddenly decide, all right, well, that's it. We're going to give this lad a shot. We're going to give him a start. We beat Luton in his debut 1-0 at Roker Park, and we go on this amazing run where we're undefeated in our next 13 games. That run secures promotion. That's what makes the loss of Preston significant. I'd mentioned earlier that it was important in the grand scheme of things because that proved to be our final defeat of the season. It was obviously a bit of a watershed moment, and the team hadn't covered themselves in glory that day. But here comes Hinnigan, who's now seen as this lucky mascot, because as soon as he drops into the side, the team push on, kick on, and get themselves promoted. He's very quickly being referred to in the press as Mr. Cool, not because of his temperament or anything like that, but because before going pro, he'd apparently worked for a cold storage firm. So I mean, it's not the best of nicknames if we're honest. But yeah, Mr. Cool, he's being called. The Sunday Sun, after his debut, they get a few words from Hinnigan. They get a few words from the man himself. He's quoted as being happy with how he played. So is Knighton. Knighton's very impressed with the performance of this new arrival. And there he goes. He remains in the team for the rest of the season. He does become this lucky mascot type of figure. It's only the following season that Joe Bolton comes back into the team once we've been promoted. And I don't know if the step up to the top flight, Knighton reevaluates things because Hinnigan isn't a fixture in the starting 11 anymore. He has a few games at right back during the season, but it's only towards the end of the season and the final few weeks of Knighton's reign that Hinnigan becomes a regular again. He's put back into his preferred, probably you could argue his preferred position of left back. Do you remember, Kelvin, around this time, he has a period where he scores 4 goals in 3 games off the bounce? Does that ring any bells for you, for Hinnigan?
Yeah. He was, this lad made the step up from 4th division to top end of the 2nd division. He made it look easy. He was definitely a good spot by the scouts, a good by Ken Knighton. I think he was a record buy as well for a 4th division player. I have that in my head that there was some kind of record that was broken when we bought him, and he could play either side, right or left. He's quite a big lad, you know. He was about 6 foot. I never saw him play. I saw quite a lot of his games for us, and I never saw him play in the middle of defence, but apparently he could play there. I would imagine that he could have, given the height of him and the cut of his jib, if you want. But what he was very, very good at, he was a good attacking fullback, and he had 2 feet. So he didn't just go down his wing and hit the byline. He could go down his wing and cut in, and if he was playing on the left, he could cut in and smash it with his right, and vice versa when he was playing on the right-hand side. So he did. I recall him getting a few games. I think Steve Whitworth got injured, and he played a few games then. And I think Joe Bolton, you know, I know he's one of my favourite players, but I think he was carrying an injury, and then when he came back in, was that at the start of 80-81, was Bolton fit again, and Hinnigan went out of the team, was my memory of it. I thought he was very unlucky to go out of the team, but unfortunately, a fit and firing Joe Bolton and Steve Whitworth, who had been in England full-back, in England right-back, and was a pretty classy performer, Whitworth, when he was, you know, certainly for a season with us. He was pretty good. There was some hot competition there, I think. But he was very good going forward. I liked him a lot. He was a really popular player with fans as well. I think they just liked these. He was pretty unfussy, you know. He just if you got the ball, he was off, you know, and he was quick across the ground. And I think that it's. I know I do sometimes go on about it, but I love a 2-footed player, me. It just gives them so many options, you know, in terms of tackling and in terms of recovery. You know, once they've got the ball, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to dally on it? You know, trying to get it onto the right foot. This lad could play the ball with either foot, and he usually played it quite well. He's a very good player. He's a good player.
Well, Kelvin, that everything you've said there ties in with my understanding of him, that he was big, strong, aggressive, pacey, uncomplicated as a player. He did. Yeah, for that first season back in the top flight, he did drop out of the picture for a while. But when he comes in, he has this burst where he scores 4 in 3 games. Some of those goals come in 2 vital wins over Crystal Palace and Coventry City. Knighton does get moved on, but we still stay up. That's the famous last day away at Liverpool when we stop up. Hinnigan is back in the team by then, I believe. And having been born in Liverpool, that was probably an enjoyable day for him. The next season, 1981-82, he does then switch to become our first choice right back, from what I can tell. And then 82-83, he becomes a bit part player, to be fair to him. He leaves on Christmas Eve, 1982, with his final few appearances being in the middle of defence. I know you said there, Kelvin, that you don't have too many memories of him.
Yeah.
But he did slot in for 1 or 2 games just before moving on. So everything we know about him comes to pass. All this about he's an attacking fullback. He can play in other positions if needs be. That is then what you see from him in his couple of years at the club. Funnily enough, it's Preston that he joins. They were the team we were playing the weekend when his deal to Sunderland first came to light. They were in Division 3 by then. What he's doing in his final years as a player is training to become a physiotherapist. So when he hangs up his boots, he has a long period still in the game, working as a physio for a load of clubs, includes Chester in that list, back at Wigan Athletic, Bury. He goes back to Chester, where he also has a spell as assistant manager. Then he concentrates on the physio side of things. Again, he gets his magic sponge back out and he works at Shrewsbury Town and has a stint at Accrington Stanley. So he has a really long career in the game. And just to wrap things up and seeing it as it was his arrival that's prompted me to look into his time at Sunderland and his subsequent career. You touched on it earlier, Kelvin. Some sources referred to it as an undisclosed fee, whereas others seem to reckon we paid around £135,000 for him, which took our spending over £1 million. And if that amount is accurate, that would have been a record buy at the time for a player in Division 4. So we obviously had a lot of trust in these 2 new scouts. We obviously liked what we saw. Knighton, having been tipped off about him, went and watched him play in a game against Bournemouth and was really keen to get it done and was happy to pay what was a big fee to get this lad in. And once he comes in, he does well for us.
Excellent. That was great. I didn't know too much about Joe Hinnigan there, so I very much enjoyed listening to that. And it was a big fee for a player at the time coming from a 4th Division team, wasn't it?
Listen, we complain nowadays about teams who buy success. £1 million back in those days on 2 or 3 players might have been viewed as the same, but it did the job done. So no complaints from us.
None indeed. We will take a very short break and we're back after a couple of ads.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teenaccounts.
Welcome back to Away the Podcast. Now, February 19th, 1936, Bobby Gurney scored as Sunderland beat Grimsby Town 3-1 in a game at Roker Park. This was a Wednesday afternoon game. We talked a few weeks ago about those midweek games before floodlights, and obviously a midweek game in February would have to kick off fairly early in the afternoon in Sunderland, but this was a 3-1 win at Roker Park. Bert Davis got the other 2. Rach Carter had a penalty saved during that game. A player called Cyril Hornby made his debut for the club. 1937, we were, of course, building the nice head of steam up in our FA Cup run at this point, and we beat Swansea. It was actually Swansea Town before they were made into a city. Swansea Town, we played in the FA Cup 5th round. We beat them 3-0. Bobby Gurney, Len Duns, an own goal from a Swansea player called Tommy Caldwell got the game done on that occasion. Now, 1965, Andrew, this is one for you potentially. We talked at the top of the show about the shirt that we wore at Nottingham Forest. Now, in 1965, we played West Ham at Roker Park. We beat them 3-2. Nick Sharkey got 2 goals and Harry Hood got the other. For a spell that we'd worn black shorts, And I remember us talking a few weeks ago about why did we change for this period of time when George Hardwick had come in with wearing black shorts. On this occasion, we reverted back to white shorts. And I think we wore white socks as well, which was a very unusual thing for us to do. I think we went back to our regular socks after this game, but we kept the white shorts. But there was obviously a bit of interchange between black shorts and white shorts, and whether it was just availability or maybe during the winter months, the kit man didn't want us to get our white shorts covered in mud. I guess it'd be a pain to get out in the washing machine or whatever the reason was. But there's a few little changes to the kit in that season.
There was, yeah, and there was something going on because you're right, we had a few little tweaks and switches and various combinations of shorts and socks at the time. I just think back then, kits were purely for practical reasons. So it probably was just down to availability, or the club got a new delivery of strips or something. Nowadays, whenever a team changes colour shorts or socks or anything, it gets labelled as a limited edition and get yourself to the club shop and buy these brand new shorts or what have you. But back then, there was no considerations like that. It was just simply a case of, we've got a game on, we need to have a strip, and ideally, if it doesn't clash with the opposition, all the better. And you see that so many times, particularly in FA Cup ties. We're very strongly connected now to Sunderland playing in red and white stripes and black shorts. And if Sunderland don't do that, particularly in a home game, a lot of traditionalists feel uncomfortable about it. But back then, there wasn't this relationship as such, and it was just a case of, look, man, wear what you need to wear and let's get this game played. And people just accepted it. The rules were often that the travelling team in FA Cup games got to wear their first choice colours. So there's all sorts of little quirks. And yeah, 65, for whatever reason, we thought we'd have a bit of a play about with the strips and see how we felt.
The thing I remember about roughly over that period, the mid-60s, was if a game was going to be on the TV, quite often I remember like the commentator saying Everton or the team in the light shorts, and vice versa, Sunderland other team in the dark shorts. I definitely remember that, but we didn't have it wouldn't explain every strip change because we didn't have the blanket TV coverage that we've got now. There were very few games that were actually even highlighted games that were actually on TV. So it just wouldn't explain, why a team might suddenly trot out in white shorts and white socks when they usually wear black shorts and red socks.
You talk about the lack of TV coverage. Also, for away games, it was quite common for fans to never even see photographs. It wasn't like nowadays or even in the 90s where the Football Echo would have a photographer at the game. It was impossible to get photos back up and ready in time to feature in the Football Echo that night. So there could have been any other number of times where there was switches in colours and we don't even know about it without
that's right.
digging through the archives and looking at the home team's version of the Football Echo or buying programs from them for subsequent games. We don't know, but it was a lot more common just in general. And like you say, when the TV cameras were there, that probably was an impact, did have a bearing on things as well. So another thing to consider.
When I was a very young kid, I really always liked football. I think my father fed my football frenzy a bit, and I can always remember looking at the newspapers. You would get, you're right about the photographs, because sometimes you would get like the cigarette cards photograph in the paper. And I can remember saying to me dad, I said, it's really good that they stop the game so that they can take these photographs, Dad, I had no concept of, I was a strange 17-year-old.
Well, I think we all could have probably guessed that, couldn't we? But I still maintain that the change to wearing black shorts over the Christmas period was because perhaps Danny Baker or Shane Ritchie hadn't turned up on the doorstep of Roker Park offering the Daz Doorstep Challenge. 1972, Sunderland played Luton at Kenilworth Road. We beat them 2-1. Richie Pitt and Dennis Chewett got the goals for us on that occasion. Vic Hallam and Viv Busby were in the Luton Town lineup that day. And in 2019, we beat Gillingham 4-2 at the stadium. Like Lee Cattermole, Tom Flanagan, Aidan McGeady penalty, and a Will Grigg penalty. I think that was the occasion that McGeady gave Grigg the ball because he wanted him to score his first goal, but he didn't give him the ball for the second penalty. He took that back and said, right, you've got off the mark now. You can bugger off. I'm going to have this one. And we beat Gillingham 4-2. On February the 20th, 1988, we played Brentford in the third division at Roker Park. We beat them 2-0. Gary Howes and Keith Birchin got the goals. I think we played Brentford on the opening day of the season, and Gary Howes has made his debut against them, hadn't we? So we played them away on the opening day of the season. The return fixture was a 2-0 win for Dennis Smith's team. 1996, we beat Ipswich 1-0. And this was a Craig Russell goal and gave us a very narrow win. And that started our run of victories that saw us win the league under Peter Reid. I just remember Shea Given having a fantastic game this night. He was pulling off saves left, right and centre, and he was the reason that we won that game from my memory. I'm not sure if you recall that one, Kelvin or Andrew, but it was a exceptionally good win, but we certainly battled for our place at the top of the table last season. It wasn't always lovely flowing football. It was grinding out results, and this was a great example of Sunderland under Peter Reid grinding out an excellent 3 points.
I remember driving home in the car, talking about Shea Given. That was our crack after that game, was all about where the hell did we dig him up from? Because he was absolutely fantastic in that game, Martin. I totally agree with you. As well, he was an unlikely looking goalkeeper as well, wasn't he? He was sort of built like almost like a blooming rugby scrum half, wasn't he? He was square shouldered and not particularly big. I mean, there were some things that were similarish to Chris Turner, but Turner was a little slimmer in his girth and what have you. Wow, he was great that night. That game, Shea Given. I think my son insisted on me buying a goalkeeper's top for him after that game, which was a rarity because he always wanted a number. He always, when he played football, he was a rugby player, my laddie, but when he played a lot of football, and when he played, he always wanted the number 9 jersey because he played scrum half at the rugby, But no, I'm sure he made us buy him a goalkeeper's top after that game. That was the impact that.
How impressive it was!
He was brilliant that game.
And that's kicked off a run of 9 games where we won every single game. So we got 27 points from 9 games, and that was a perfectly timed run to send us up to the top of the table that season. Of course, that's where we stayed. 1999, Sunderland beat Wolves 2-1. Niall Quinn and Alan Johnson got the goals for us, and Andy Melville was on the score sheet for Wolves, no own goal on that occasion. And in 2021, we beat Burton Albion 3-0 away. Grant Ledbetter, Lyndon Gooch and Charlie White with the goals on that occasion. Now we'll move on to February the 21st, 1921. Barney Travers, who was born in Sunderland, he was transferred to Fulham for another British record. There's all sorts of records going in this week, isn't there, in the early 1900s? But this was a British record transfer fee of £3,000 that Fulham paid for Barney Travers. He'd played 63 games for us and he'd scored 28 goals, but he moved on to Craven Cottage. 1934, we talked about Jimmy Connor earlier, playing his last game for Sunderland at Blackburn. He was on the score sheet on this day in 1934 in a 6-0 home win over Tottenham. Rich Carter got a hat-trick, and that was his first hat-trick for the club. And Bobby Gurney got the other 2. 1976. I don't know if you remember this game, Kelvin, as well. It was a 4-1 win over Charlton at Roker Park. Now, Charlton's goalkeeper, a chap called Graham Tutt, got injured after 6 minutes, and Derek Hales, who was a famous Charlton player, and he went in goal for the game. Charlton actually took the lead, but Mel Holden, Bobby Moncur, Pop Robson, and Tony Towers got goals for Sunderland, scoring past Derek Hales to give us a 4-1 win.
Yeah, I do remember that game, and I was shocked when Hales went in to the goals because he was a more than handy centre forward. Derek Hales, he was a lad that was being touted at the time for big transfers. There were a number of teams looking at him, and I'm trying to remember the name of the lad that he played alongside Hales, and I've lost that lad's name. But it was like it was a bonus when he went in, because they did take the lead, and he'd been looking pretty sharp in that game, as I remember. And then Tut got injured, and off he goes into the goals. And in all honesty, I'm in the full end clapping me hands, thinking, I'm pleased to see the back of that boy. He was built like, I'll tell you who Derek Hales was like. He was like Malcolm MacDonald. He was a square-shouldered, strong, really, really quick, good in the air. He was a very, very good centre forward, good goal scorer. I wish I could remember the name of the lad that he played beside.
Keith Peacock was up there. George Hope was up there. Tony Young on this occasion. I'm not sure if the chap who you're thinking of was playing at Roker Park that day. Of course, this was the days of having one sub, and that was always an outfield player, wasn't it?
Yeah.
A lad called Richie Bowman, who'd come on for Graham Tutton. He'd obviously gone to play outfield while Derek Hales had gone into goals. And it was actually Bowman who scored Charlton's opener after 70. He put Charlton in front 11 minutes after coming off the bench. But yes, that scoreline quickly turned around. It sent us to the top of the league, actually. It sent Bob Stokoe's team up to the first position in the second division.
Bowman narrowed the ball into the back of the net for that goal for Charlton, I think. Yeah.
Very good. I
don't get that one, Calvin.
Bowman.
Yes.
Bowman.
Oh, okay.
I tell you what.
Right.
His Lemsip or something's working wonders for him, isn't it?
Well, isn't it a worry that even when he's at half strength, he's still too sharp for me? I still can't keep up with his gags.
You and me both, mate. You and me both, don't worry about it. 1995. Sunderland won their first game for a couple of months. We beat Watford 1-0 with a goal from Craig Russell. Now, February the 22nd, 1939, Sunderland played an FA Cup fifth round second replay against Blackburn at Hillsborough. Now, this was the game that we talked about earlier, or the subsequent game from the game that we talked about earlier, because we played Blackburn in the first replay, and Jimmy Connor's done his knee, and that was his last game for the club. We go to Hillsborough, fifth round second replay, and Bobby Gurney breaks his ankle. And because of the war, this ended up being Bobby Gurney's last competitive game for the club. So within the space of 2 FA Cup replays, 2 years after winning the FA Cup, we've lost these 2 stalwarts of that team, haven't we? And obviously the injuries weren't necessarily the reason why they didn't play competitively again. The war obviously intervened, and Bobby Gurney certainly played during those periods in different competitions, and I presume Jimmy Connor did as well. But for the last competitive games to both happen in this FA Cup tie that was going on against Blackburn, and for both of them to pick up injuries that effectively ended their competitive Sunderland careers. It was a huge shame coming 2 years after the FA Cup win, Andrew, isn't it?
It is, particularly in the case of Jimmy Connor. I think because of Bobby Gurney and Raish Carter and the fact they were local lads, they seem to get a lot of the attention. They seem to be the big names in the team. But Jimmy Connor was a tremendous player for Sunderland and an equally important part of that fantastic side. But we see it, don't we? Whenever a team hits the heights, it's then always sad in the years that follow when those teams break up. The timing of the war might have had an impact. I don't know. Perhaps could things have been different and football remained the same? Maybe they might have eventually made a return from injury. I don't know, but it's always sad. We love tracking the progress of players and we love talking about debuts and this was their first goal. This was the first time they played consecutive games and you can see them getting better. It's always a shame. Everything comes to an end, but that's the sadder side of football when people's time's up.
I'm just scrolling through the war leagues and the appearances that people made, and Jimmy Connor made an appearance in a charity game a season or two after, but apart from that, his appearances are pretty thin on the ground.
He might have been ruled out regardless.
It looks as if he may well have been, but it's I find that period during the wars where the clubs are playing war leagues and northern divisions and stuff like that absolutely intriguing. And we've talked amongst ourselves, haven't we, of doing something deeper on that period of time, which I think would be hugely interesting. But yes, that was 1939, February 22nd, Bobby Gurney's last competitive appearance for Sunderland. 1989, Thomas Hauser arrived from Basil Old Boys. Dennis Smith had been after a striker for a while. Billy Whitehurst had gone back to Hull, hadn't he, in exchange or part exchange for Tony Norman. And Thomas Hauser arrived from Switzerland, obviously the German striker, 200 grand. He was a funny player, Thomas Hauser, wasn't he? He got a few goals that season, actually. But for a big, tall striker, he got knocked off the ball an awful lot. But I always think Dennis Smith really fancied him as a player. And it was a Bristol City League Cup game, Littlewoods Cup game, at the start of the 1990-91 season. Hauser did his Achilles tendon. I think we won 6-0, perhaps, on that occasion down at Ashton Gate. Thomas Hauser did his Achilles.
It was a big win, yeah.
It was. Ruled out for 6 months. And Dennis Smith actually brought him back into the team as soon as he was fit again that season. He scored against Southampton down at the Dell. And there is a school of thought that he was the first German to score in the top flight of English footballers, the first West German, certainly. But Thomas Hauser arrived from Basil Old Boys for 200 grand on February the 22nd, 1989. 2005, Sunderland played Rotherham at the Stadium of Light. And this, we talked earlier about the game against Ipswich, kicking off a good run of wins for us that sent us up to the top of the league. This had a similar effect on us. It was a nighttime game, beat Rotherham 4-1. Now, Sean Thornton had come on as a sub early in the first half. I think he came on for Julio Arca after about half an hour. And the first thing he did was to knock a free kick into the goal. I got a feeling it was Mike Pollitt who had a spell at Sunderland in goal for Rotherham that night. I might be mistaken. But Thornton scored a free kick. Dean Whitehead and Gary Breen got other goals, and Sean Thornton scored another free kick as well. And Thornton was always a frustrating player because he had so much bloody ability, so much potential, but you just didn't know what you were going to get from him from one day to the next. I think the Glass Spider knew what they were going to get from him most nights, but I'm not sure the fans or the manager. I think he did Mick McCarthy's head in, didn't he, for the vast majority of the time, because he was so immensely talented, but just so unpredictable.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and it's one of that's another top 10 pod, isn't it? Naming top 10 players that have both absolutely excited you and frustrated you at the same time, because this lad looked like he could. He looked like he could play football, Sean Thornton, didn't he? But you just were, as you say, never sure what you were going to get off him. I think one of Andrew's pals got his cap off him, didn't he? Was it Andrew?
Right.
Andrew, was it one of your pals that stole his cap?
How dare you, Kelvin? It was Chris. It was one of Chris's mates.
Chris's pals. Yeah.
But I think though, weren't they? It was all fun and games at the start, and then afterwards, when Thornton was unable to chase after this lad, everybody kind of looked at each other and thought, "Hang on, why is our mate outrunning a professional footballer? There's something not right here." So no, not guilty. I've got to defend my mates. They were not involved in harassing any players. One thing I will say, Kelvin, is you two are coming up with ideas aplenty today. You're supposed to come up with some cracking ideas for future podcasts. So I hope nobody's making a note of these and expecting these to all come out all at once, because there's going to be a lot of research on like the interwar years and Sunderland players who flattered. What is it? Flattered to deceive.
Top 10 flattered to deceive.
Yeah. We'll have to put them on the back burner until we get a bit more time to plan those ones out, I think.
That one's a real tease, though, isn't it? We'll keep talking about that.
Fascinating.
Absolutely. The stories that when you were talking earlier about going down the rabbit hole on the press archive, the things that come up during the war years, probably I would say to you, a lot of it now to do with football and more to do with life, You just think, oh my God, how can that be? It's such a tease, those war years. I'd be
Well, I was just going to say there, we'd have to get our thinking caps on if we were doing those. And Chris's mate knows exactly where he can get a cap. So we'll ask Chris to put in touch with him before we research those ones.
Thinking cap may or may not be generous, I'm not too sure. We will take a very short break there and we'll be back soon.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to How Are the Podcast for the final part of this week's On This Week. And for the last thing that we're going to dive into today, we're going to go all the way back to 1977, Kelvin. And there was a couple of big games that fell into this week, weren't there? There was a game against Middlesbrough and a game against West Brom. And there was kind of wrapped around other things going on at the club, wasn't it? So I will hand the floor over to you. You might have to take yourself off mute, Kelvin.
How's that?
Worse. It's even worse. Put yourself back on mute.
Boo! Switch it
Sorry.
back on. Yeah.
Sorry, that was a low blow.
Okay. Settle down, you two. Settle down. To put a bit of context on this season, it was where season back up into the top tier. Bob Stokoe had taken us up, and it hadn't gone to plan. He himself ended up resigning through ill health, and then we had Ian McFarlane for a while, and then Jimmy Adamson came in. But we were 22nd. We were bottom of the league of the division for a long time. We were in 22nd, second position. We'd only won 3 games all season and had lost 18 coming into this week. At Roker Park, we'd won 2, drawn 3, and lost 7. And given what had happened the season before, it was such a shock to the system, because we went undefeated at Roker Park the season before. Only Crystal Palace beat us in the cup the season before, and it was such a shock to the system. We'd only just ended an 11-game run without a victory. That was a 1-0 win against Bristol City a week earlier. I think that got a mention last week on this week. That was a turgid game, and we really, really dug it out. It was I have to tell you, it wasn't a very pleasant game to be at, but we dug it out. But what I will say is there were some signs, because the previous 2 games before that Bristol City game, and I'd been to both of these games, we'd gotten a point from each game. We played Stoke at home, and we drew. We didn't score any goals, but we actually played quite well in that game, and Stoke were going quite well at the time. And then we went to Arsenal and took a point at Arsenal, and we should have won that game. We could have easily won it, and we played very, very well. We played some great footy down there. Arsenal were the kind of team that would let you do that, though. It was cracking. It was a cracking performance, even though we didn't get the points. Jack Charlton's Borough were opposition. They were on a great run. They were 5th. They were unbeaten in 13 games. And they were serious challengers for Europe that season. The Borough. There's some cracking players in that team. You'd Graham Souness was strutting his stuff in their midfield. A lad called Phil Bosma, Stuart Bohm, Willie Madram, David Mills was a fine player. Terry Cooper, who played fullback for Leeds, played at Borough. He was a stylish operator, and a lad I always thought this lad was a fine footballer. And if we could have bought him, he was a lad I coveted for years. David Armstrong, playing for Borough. Yeah,
he was a Sunderland lad, wasn't he?
Yeah, fine player, Martin, as well. I always thought this lad would have done good business for us. For Sunderland, with Mick Doherty, he was back from injury, and I felt a bit sorry for Mickey Henderson. He'd played well in the previous couple of games, but Doherty was one of the, he was the shoe-in, one of the shoe-in players. Him and Jeff Clark, I would have said to you, were shoe-ins. If Doherty was fit, he would play. Tony Towers was injured, but he was injured. I'm led to believe that he was genuinely injured, but there were continuing rumbles about him being sold, and about there being some difficulty between Adamson and him, and that was a sore one. That Towers, I would have said to you, would have been the other shoe-in. He was a lad that could strut his stuff in that division. With 3 youngsters playing for us in the team that day, they were known as Charlie's Angels. Charlie's Angels was for those that don't know, was a fantastic 70s TV show that showcased 3 very beautiful young ladies as private detectives, and Charlie was the boss, I think. But we had these 3 young lads playing, and for those that don't know, they were Gary Rowell, Sean Elliott, and Kevin Arnott playing in the team. And they'd all been scouted by the legendary Charlie Ferguson, and hence Charlie's Angels were playing. Kevin Arnott, I know, Andrew, you mentioned my liking for Kevin Arnott. I'm the same as everybody else. I think you like goalkeepers because you saw yourself maybe as a keeper at one time. Martin, you probably kept a good eye on the centre halves and stuff like that, you know. So he played in the middle of midfield, Kevin Arnott, and he was it was the position that I always wanted to play when I played, and he was just such I thought he was a fine footballer.
I need to step in there, Kelvin, because you're casting aspersions on me. I was always looking at the strikers.
Oh, right. Sorry, Mon. Sorry.
Always looking at the strikers.
You had the look of a brutal centre half. That's probably where that's coming from.
That's what used to cause problems for central defenders.
The
might characterize.
Yeah, the Black Hill Bruiser. Anyway,
there's more than a grain of truth in that one, Kelvin.
I know there is. Back to Kevin Arnott and more refined things. Kevin Arnott, his renaissance under Adamson was amazing. You know, he was 18 years old. He'd been playing on a month-to-month contract, and this lad had even contemplated giving up football. There were times where he couldn't get a place in the reserve team prior to Adamson coming in. But Jimmy Adamson, he saw something in him, and he told the press, he says, in relation to Arnott, he said, he's someone of class, and he has something special that I could not give him through coaching. So that's him talking about an 18-year-old that can hardly get a game in the reserves previous to this. It was fantastic sort of period for them young lads, and the crowd really got behind them as well, but with no right, given the context of the season, to expect what was going to happen next. Borough were far and away the favourites for the game, and the game kicks off. It's pretty even in the initial stages, but we're continuing, to play a bit, to pass the ball about, move about. Our movement's quite good. I'm thinking, we're continuing where we're formed from the Arsenal game, was what it looked like. And Borough's, that midfield was much wanted at this time. Souness and Armstrong were in that link play with David Mills was, it was formidable. But they were finding it, as the game went on, they were just finding it increasingly harder to affect the game. Bobby Kerr, Sean Elliott, Kevin Arnott, Gary Rowell, they were all over the park. It was a pretty fluid midfield. Bobby Kerr was flying down the left wing at one point in this game. You didn't normally see that. Normally, Bobby, especially as his career went on, he stuck to his right-hand side. You'd sometimes see him in the middle of the midfield, but by and large, he played that right-hand side. And the four of them this game, they were just all over the place in a nice way. It was excellent. 27 minutes, Elliott, as he was prone to do, he wins a great heading duel in the middle of the midfield, probably in their half. He nuts the ball forward into space, and Bob Lee just glides in and takes the ball into the box and plants it past Cuff in the Borough goal. It was a cracking strike from cracking bit of movement from Lee and a cracking strike from him. We're 1-0 up. We're like, whoa, 1-0, It was like a shock to the system, a goal, and I can remember, like, that's it, what is it? We score a goal, and all I'm thinking is, I wish the ref would just blow the whistle now, And none of this altruistic, let's have a great game, a great derby, let's just blow the bloody whistle, man. But we take the lead into half-time. I felt it was a deserved lead. We take the lead into half-time. Jeff Clark doesn't reappear for the second half. Now, he's probably been, as I said earlier, one of our most consistent players in the season. And what he's done in the first minute of the game, apparently, we'll learn all this later on after the game in the press. In the first minute of the game, he sustained an injury, and it turns out to be a medial ligament injury, and he misses the rest of the season with this injury. Now, that knee injury troubled him throughout his career because the previous season he'd missed the end of the season because of a knee injury. And I can tell you, when the teams lined up and you realised that Clarkey wasn't going to be there, there was like we cheered the team off at half time, but the collective anxiety and in the crowd, you'll know what I'm talking about. We've been affecting Sunderland's games all season this season with what's coming from the crowd, where positivity and where support. In that season, the collective anxiety that used to build and come down from the stand. There's a big crowd in. We've cheered them off, but as the teams line up, you can feel that, oh my God, Clarkey's not there. What the hell, And what Adamson did was he moved Elliott back to play alongside Jackie Ashurst, and he pulled Gary Rowe into Sean Elliott's position. And the reason I'm emphasising that is everybody thinks of Rowe. A lot of people think of him as a forward, or an attacking midfielder, which is what I certainly thought he was. But he had this capacity to play a number of positions, Gary Rowe, and he slots in there and plays really, really well in that position. Advancing, he doesn't, and so did Sean Elliott do that when he played there. You would often see him charging into the box and charging upfield when he was meant to be the covering player in front of the back four, Rowley plays there that game. He played really well in the second half, as did Sean Elliott in the back line with Jackie Ashurst. Anyway, it's the game kicks off again. Alan Brown comes on. He goes up front and slightly to the left. The game kicks off, and I think the collective anxiety is, can we hold out? Can we hold out and win this game 1-0? That's what we're thinking. Or you have little faith, because we'll go on to smash 3 more goals past what I would say to you would be a stunned Middlesbrough and their supporters. There wasn't many Borough fans there that day, but the ones that were there, they just looked stunned. They said, what the bloody hell happened there? On 56 minutes, a Mel Holden rocket from a Kerr cross. He just absolutely swiveled and rocketed the ball into the back of the net. 81 minutes, Alan Brown had a shot that Cuff saved, but Arnott just strolled in and put the rebound into the back of the net. And then 86 minutes, a Barry Kerr chip to a defensive midfielder, Gary Rowe. At that point, Rowe ghosts into this space as he was prone to do, and put a really clever header past Cuff. Cuff was moving one way, and he just darted it across him. He was really clever with his head, Gary Rowe. 4-0. 7th heaven. I can't tell you the amazement, the disbelief, it was just unbelievable in the context of the season. The lads were roaring off the park. It was, the whole crowd was almost disbelieving. Jimmy Adamson, he was asked about the game afterwards. He was quoted in the press. He says it wasn't tactics that won the game. I think the press had said to him, "What was it that you did that?" And he put his hands up. He says, "So it wasn't tactics. It was just attitude." The boys just went for it. Jackie Charlton, I always loved to see Jackie Charlton on a downer. I never forgave him an incident that he did at Roker Park where I think Leeds got a late equaliser and he was shouting at the fans walking down the tunnel, "You're out now, you're out now." It was the FA Cup, and I always thought, you bloody Asherton mag that you're, I never forgave him for that. Anyway, to give Jackie his due, he said in the press, typical Jack Charlton. There was a lot to like about him, wasn't there? He said, "I didn't think they were capable of that. I came here to win." John Donahue, who you'll recall, wrote for the regional press, journalist of some renown. I think as well, his nickname was the Beast, wasn't it, John Donahue? He wrote in the Journal about this game. "This is one of the most remarkable results in the entire league programme. Middlesbrough have one of the best defensive records, and adding up the goals Sunderland have scored this season is a test on mental arithmetic that would not tax the mental resources of a 7-year-old. It was just fantastic result. And just, when you use a term, when you say unbelievable, that's what it was. You just, in the context of the season, you just, wow, I'm coming away from the game thinking, God, we've got a chance here. We're still bottom. We were still bottom after that. But I'm thinking, we've got a chance. And I wasn't the only one, We've been bottom of the league all season, but we're beating Borough 4-0. We beat Bristol City 1-0 the week before. Suddenly we've got a chance, We didn't have to wait long. We had West Bromwich Albion. We're next up a couple of days later. And I'll be honest with you, I'm walking down the Fulwell End steps after the Borough game thinking, we've got West Brom on Wednesday night. God, if we can scrape a 1-0 win, imagine, if we can just scrape a 1-0 win. But there were a couple of things I hadn't appreciated. West Brom hadn't won a game since December, but they did have some good players in that team at the time. Johnny Giles was that player manager, and he still had a bit of football in him. They had a centre forward called David Cross, who always scored goals against us. He was you might think of him as a journeyman centre forward, but he always played for Nyon, always played for top division teams, and he scored a lot of goals. Saying they had a winger called Willie Johnson, who I loved. He was a Scottish international winger. He was a Tanner Bob, what they called a Tanner Bob winger. He could turn on a sixpence. He was full of tricks. And there are guys at the back called Ali Robertson, Len Cantello, and John Whale. And they were such a unit, them three at the back. They were rock solid for West Brom, them three. I always admired them, I always thought they were a pretty good unit. And sub for West Brom that night was a lad called John Truick. Now, John Truick, he was a local boy. He was just down the road from me in Morpeth. And he was just a year older than us. And I can tell you, this lad as a kid was a fantastic player. He'd England schoolboy caps. I think he had about 8 of them. He had England youth caps, and I'm sure he had about 7 of them. He was it was a fantastic record that he had with England as a schoolboy. And he was a midfield player as well. So he was somebody in my, because I went to school in Newcastle, I didn't play in the same ever against him, but I was very aware of him, and I saw him play a few times as a school lad, and he was a cracking player. But he ended up at Newcastle for a while. From I think the early 80s, he played at Newcastle. But he came as their sub. We had. By this point, we know that Jeff Clark's out. So Mickey Henderson comes back in, and unusually, and I'd never appreciated that Mick Doherty could do this, but Adamson obviously knew that he could. He brings Henderson back in at fullback and puts Doherty into the middle of the defence. Now Mick Doherty was 5'6", and you're thinking, what's going to happen there? We've got David Cross coming. I'm like, even though I'm a young man by that point, but I cannot leave team selection alone. I'm like, what the hell's he playing out there? What's going on? Bloody Adamson. How the hell are we going to win this with a midget playing at centre half? Bugger. Adamson knew what he was doing. Doc had a fantastic game that night. He was absolutely brilliant behind Jackie Ashurst, to be fair. You're thinking as the game kicks off, could we, I'm thinking, can we scrape a win and keep this run going? Can we scrape a win? I don't know nothing about football, me. Because we scored. I think we scored our quickest goal ever that night. Because although it's given us a minute, I'm telling you, it was under. I think it was under 30 seconds, and West Brom kicked off. it was unbelievable. They kicked off, played the ball forward. Mickey Henderson intercepts the pass, lays it off to Kevin Arnott, and Arnott, man, it was like Jim Baxter's claw. Arnott just looks up, pings this 35-yarder right into the path of Bob Lee, and Bob Lee just absolutely takes it forward and smashes it in the back of the goal. There were people that were still coming up the stairs and everything, it was, what a start. And it was in the context of not the season, but what had happened the previous game. You're just thinking, here we go. Come on. It was fantastic that in the football we played that day, it more coming back to the context of the season, it just looked like a cliche warning here, cliche coming. The shackles were off, and the football that the lads were playing was just, they were trying everything, not all of it was coming off, but everything. Mel Holden was doing step overs, and Bob Lee was making tackles, which you hardly ever saw him do. It was just, what a game it was on 33 minutes.
Kelvin, sorry, I've just dug up the match report, and it gives the goal time as 25 seconds.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, I'd looked at that on StatCat, and they said it was a minute. And I'd picked a couple of reports out, and they said it was a minute as well. But I would say that 20, yeah.
Yeah, the Journal's match report gives us 25 seconds.
Brilliant.
I think, to be fair, when they actually put the minute or the time down, it's within the first minute, isn't it? So it says 1 minute. It's between 0 seconds and 59 seconds, I guess, isn't it?
Well, we're getting onto something if we're having a debate about what's the quickest goal Sunderland have ever scored, and we're coming down to seconds, not minutes.
Well, this is true. This is very right.
I'll tell you, it was brilliant to be in the ground. We went from anxiety to delirium in literally 25 seconds. It was brilliant. 33 minutes, second goal for Sunderland and Bob Lee. Sean Elliott got a good header in. Osborne again, a little bit unlucky. He actually makes a really good save, but Bob Lee just steps up and pops it in the back of the net. That's 33 minutes. 36 minutes, Sean Elliott lashes the ball in the back of the net from a Jackie Ashurst free kick. 3-0 half-time, 7th heaven. Boys are walking off the pitch. We're delirious in the stands. It was absolutely brilliant first half. The lads come out the second half and they just go for it again. Sean Elliott sets up Gary Rowe with a shooting opportunity from the edge of the box. Rowe, he just didn't miss with those opportunities, and again, I've said a couple of times, he blasted it into the back of the net. Gary Rowe used to just pass these, but I mean, he was obviously hitting them with some sort of power, but he just passes it into across Osborne and into the back of the net. It was such a neat, tidy goal, fantastic. On 77 minutes, they score a goal. And I'm wondering if you have any idea who might have scored that goal, unless you're sitting looking at the match report.
I did.
You can see it.
I did have a look before we started recording, just to see the games that we were going to be talking about. And this name did stand out, and I'd noticed that you didn't mention them when you were talking about the West Brom players and the names that were in that team that night.
Yeah. So was Brian Robson, a young Brian Robson?
Yeah.
No,
so, of course, this is the former England and, well, the future England and Manchester United captain, as opposed to the striker who played for us.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. And he he's, I think he's a Chester Street boy, isn't he, Brian Robson? But I tell you what, his team got hammered that night, but you could see why people were talking about him as well, because he never stopped in the game. He never stopped. That 5-0 down, and he got that goal because he just never stopped. He was a fantastic player in his own right, Brian Robson, and he certainly got on the radar that night in a horrific defeat for West Brom. But 77 minutes he gets one back. 85 minutes. Well, there's lovely bit of skill between Kerr and Mel Holden. Bobby Kerr, Mel Holden, they do a quick double take, and the ball pings between the two of them, and then they set up Bob Lee for his hat-trick, and it was a cracking performance from the whole of the team. It's like almost unkind to sort of signal out any one player, but Bob Lee actually did play really well this night. He was never my favourite player, Bob Lee, but he definitely, what a night he had. And he scored 4 goals in 17 games coming into the Middlesbrough game. And here he is, he's scored 8 goals in 19 games, 2 games 4 days later. He's doubled his goal tally for the season. It was 6-1, the game finishes. It was one of the greatest nights at Roker Park for a number of seasons. It was a fantastic performance. It was our biggest top-tier win since we beat Charlton there won in 1956 at Roker Park. And for the first time since December, I think, it lifted us from 22nd to 20th in the table. So we weren't on the bottom anymore. And the whole crowd were like really walking out the ground. You were just like, instead of thinking it in your head, people were actually saying, hey, we're going to do this if we keep playing like this. The fans are chanting Sunderland are back. There's 30,000 of us there that night. It was tremendous. We scored 10 goals in 2 games. We'd scored 3 goals in 3 months prior to that. It was just unbelievable. It really was. Len Hetherington in the Evening Chronicle, he was a pithy writer about Sunderland. I think he was a bit of a Sunderland fan, Len. And he said, if Borough were murdered last Saturday, West Brom were massacred last night by a breathtaking display of football. And referring to Charlie's Angels, he says, their boyish enthusiasm is rubbed off on their more senior colleagues. 90 minutes of football has become a pleasure and a sheer joy for the fans. He called that one bloody right, I tell you. It was just fantastic. And you really felt that the comeback was on. And we had West Ham coming up in a week's time at Roker Park. I think we had a bit of a break, and West Ham were on the way. And once again, I'm like, well, if we can sneak a 1-0 win, that would be brilliant. But we'll probably hear what happened in that game at the next in the next session of On This Week.
To be continued, that story, isn't it? But it's remarkable how things can change around in football like that, isn't it? You know, as you've described it, we played 11 league games and not scored before that Bristol City game that you referred to. We scored one. So you've got one goal in 12 league games.
Yeah.
Like, how on earth does something just click and change to score that many goals all of a sudden? It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. I wish, I love talking about it, and I love talking about that period in those games, because it was fantastic, man. I was talking to a friend the other night who was telling me that the last season, the two Coventry playoff semi-finals and the Wembley final was probably the three best games in successive games that he'd ever watched in all his life. Now, he's a bit younger than me. He didn't see that 1977 run, and I thought I wasn't going to argue with him. I said, it was fantastic. It was brilliant. But I can think of another period that was just like that. It was, and what is that ingredient? What is the magic formula? What is I think of it as the symbiosis between what's happening on the pitch and what's happening in the stand, because the ruckus that was coming down from us, the noise, the support. I'm not even talking about organised chanting. I'm talking about a tackle goes in and the bloody noise lifts the roof off, Arnott slings that pass. He starts the game with the lad next to me that night, he said, that's like something Jim Baxter would have done. I said, well, no, it's not. It's like something Kevin Arnott does, Yeah. It was just what a start, but he totally hoovered the crowd up into the match, so that instead of that collective anxiety coming down from the stands, you've just got this. I mean, I don't even know what to call it. You can call it support, but it's something more than that. It impels the players, to just drive on and especially, I totally agree with it is a cliche, but the shackles being off and just people trying stuff. Not all of it works out, but the crowd are totally okay with that because they know that some of it is going to work out. Suddenly there's belief both on the pitch and off the pitch. It was a magical couple of games, and it's not finished yet.
No, it's not. I'm just sort of looking at the teams or the lineups that played in those few home games prior to that run of games, and there was quite a few team changes. Wasn't I'm going back to a game against Leeds over the Christmas period.
Yeah,
and we got beat 1-0, and you had the likes of Mick Henderson, Ray Train, Jim Holton, Roy Greenwood playing, Alan Brown starting the game, and there's obviously a number of changes that he's made to try to spark something in that period, hasn't there? And something obviously clicked and worked, and
Charlie's Angels, Gary Rowell, Kevin Arnott and Sean Elliott get a lot of praise for this this period, and they were definitely part of the trigger, part of the reason why that happened. But I would say to you, Mick Doherty was a key ingredient, because I think he'd been out a little bit, hadn't he? He'd been out injured.
Well, I think by looking at this, Kelvin, he just signed.
Yeah.
So he made his debut. It was against Coventry, maybe? Coventry.
Yeah.
So he made his debut at the start of January against Coventry. Then he'd missed a couple of games, I think. So he'd come back into the team. He was a new addition to the team.
Yeah.
So, he hadn't gone through that big run of games without scoring and all that sort of stuff. He was a relatively experienced player coming in, wasn't he?
I would say to you, Martin, he was a real ingredient to that. He was a very underrated player, a real leader on the pitch, and a very, very clever footballer as well. He could play in middle of midfield, right hand side of midfield, right back, and then in that game we see him effectively play a sweeper behind Jackie Ashurst. He was brilliant that game. Really clever with the ball. His decision making was good. He knew when to bluter it out the park, and he knew where he could maybe just take a little look and lay the ball off or play a longer pass. He's a very, very clever footballer. Fantastic couple of games, and given where we'd been, the collective joy about the dirge that the season had been to suddenly be blessed with these 10 goals, it was so enjoyable.
It's funny how things can just change around so quickly, can't it, in football? And after going through that spell of no goals and seeing all those goals in that run of games, and it would be similar in this current season. After scoring 6 away goals all season, imagine the next 4 or 5 games. If we rack up 20 away goals in the next 4 or 5 games, that could be quite nice. But it would almost be similar, wouldn't it? If you look at our away games, we've got Bournemouth away, Leeds away, and the visitors away. So that would be exceptionally nice if we managed to do that this season.
Very nice thought indeed, that one.
Well, I think we'll leave people just to let their imaginations run wild about what the next few games could hold, with taking 1977 as inspiration. Andrew's had to duck off. He's had to depart early, so he's left me with the task of setting you lovely people something to ponder on over the next few weeks. And the little question that we've got about something that we'll cover in next week's episode is on February the 29th, 1989, a striker who we mentioned earlier in this podcast, Thomas Hauser, made his debut for Sunderland. It was a game that we played at Roker Park. We won 2-0, but which former Sunderland player was sent off for the opposition? We will leave you to ponder on that one over the coming days. So all that is left for me to say is thank you very much, Kelvin.
Lovely. Really enjoyed that there.
And we hope you're feeling better very, very soon.
Wow,
you've certainly perked up during the course of this podcast, Calvin. So
10 goals
very
will
promising.
do that for you. 10 goals
No,
will
that's
do
it.
that for you.
That's what Sunderland will do for you. So yes, that's the best medicine anybody could get. 10 goals in 3 games, or 10 goals in 2 games rather, isn't it? And a very satisfying February. We will be back next week for another episode of On This Week, and of course we'll be back tomorrow with another podcast with How We're the Podcast. Until then, it's goodbye from us.